Hey guys, I'm Bella of Bella's Custom Crochets, and this is not a crochet episode. This is a knit episode. Normally I am a crochet podcaster and a crochet content maker with a little bit of knitting mixed in, but this is dedicated to my Box of Socks 2020. I learned how to knit socks in the end of 2019, and then I set out to make a large box of socks in 2020 and kind of not perfect, but improve my sock knitting skills. So this is going to be about what I learned, what tools I use, some tips and tricks, and I'm going to link everything that I'm talking about down below as far as patterns and resources. I am by no means an expert. I pretty much don't know what I'm talking about sock knitting, but I have learned a whole bunch, and I'm going to be sharing some stuff that you might find helpful either as a new knitter or as a crocheter turned knitter, or just someone just looking to start out with socks and feeling overwhelmed. I'm going to give you my insight, not necessarily correct, but my thoughts and feelings on socks. So I knit a box of socks. This is a real fancy shoebox that I covered in some scrapbooking paper, but there was for several years running, a hashtag Box of Socks challenge that was run by Kristen from Vine. She stepped down, I think, in 2020, and somebody else stepped in, and it was like you knit a pair of socks, 12 pairs of socks in a year, or a sock monthly, pair of socks monthly, for 12 pairs of socks, and you take a picture of your box of socks, you win prizes, whatever. So I had set out to do that. I did not make it to 12 pairs. I made it to 10 pairs plus one toddler pair. So 11-ish pairs of socks. And I learned a lot. I had joined that like Ravelry group for the box of socks. Never actually did anything. So I can't really speak to that. But yeah, I learned how to make socks. I have socks now. So did something right. So I'm going to be sharing just each of the patterns I made, some of the yarns I used, and then yeah, some tools and some resources as well that I found helpful, and I think that you would find helpful as a new sock knitter as well. I have already recorded this video once and realized that I had some stuff set up incorrectly, so hopefully it's right now, and we'll just count that as a take one. So I have notes here. I'm going to be looking down a bit just because I want to make sure I give you the correct information about each pair. I will say, like I said, from the, and I knit my first pair, we'll talk about that in a second, in the end of 2019, November-ish, and then the rest of these are going to be from 2020. This year I'm hoping 2021 to hit that 12 pairs, but if not, whatever, it's a self-imposed goal, so it's alright. Overall, there hasn't been a lot of consistency as far as sizing or materials or tools used, because I'm still trying to figure out what my sole socks are, the socks of my sole of my body and the soles of my feet. I have really high arches. My feet are technically not the same size. I sound like some kind of freakish ogre now. Maybe I am. But yeah, I've learned a bunch about tools and sizing that I don't like. Generally now, I'm a 60 to 64 stitch count on a 2.5 millimeter US size 1 needle. But some of the socks earlier on I'm going to be talking about, I started out with 56 stitches on like a US size 2 and then tweaked some stuff, and I'm still not entirely sure what fits me perfectly as far as foot length and leg length ideal and all of that. I know I like heel flaps and gussets over short row heels. Like I said, high arch, so that gusset makes a big difference for me. These are some things you just might want to consider going into it if it's your first time knitting socks. Kind of assess your feet and see what you really want. Everything, with the exception of one pair, I'm going to be showing you are fingering weight socks, but I'm going to be linking some resources as well. And mentioning a pattern or two on if you want to try a heavier weight sock first. Like I said, I am a crocheter, normally, mostly. I do both, but I crochet as a career and knit as hobby. And socks have just been a really nice, like, grab and go project. Not that we go much anywhere, but, like, when my husband's driving the car, bring some socks. And it's a nice, like, palette cleanser for me in between crochet designing to just have something I don't really have to think about too much. I tend to choose really simple sock patterns that are memorizable. I've never done anything fancy like lace cables. Real simple stuff that's just easy, good for watching TV, good for taking in the car. And I don't have to think or measure or take notes. So it's a nice in-between project, and I pretty much always have one on the go now. So yeah, I'm just going to share. I think that's all I wanted to say as far as like my size and whatnot. I'm going to share a little bit more about needles. No, I'll tell you about the needles now. Why not? So what I started out on, I'm going to be sharing resources linking you to different methods of how to make socks and whatnot later on. But what I started out with, I already knew how to knit. I had been knitting since high school. So good 12 or so years of knitting under my belt before I attempted socks. Maybe not 12 solid years, but 12 years-ish. I started out on Chiagoo 9-inch circulars. A lot of people knit socks on double-pointed needles. I am not a fan of double-pointed needles. A lot of people knit socks on magic loop, which is where you're using a big circular needle and you're like looping the cord. Not a fan of that, which is just personal preference, and these are the things you find out as you do stuff. So if you have knit a pair of socks before and you didn't love it, maybe try some different tools or a different yarn or a different technique, and you might come around to the idea of it. It does take a little bit of getting used to knitting stitches on a small circumference like that, and having to make 2 of them can get discouraging. But these are a circular needle. They are 9 inches in total. Short needle tips, what are you, about 1.5 inches long maybe? The complaint with these is that your hands can get really cramped because you're holding onto a tiny needle in a tiny little, circumference. I do like these because I prefer this still over magic loop or DPNs. If you love those, that's awesome for you. Not awesome for me. So I started out with these on a US size 2. Also went down to a size 1.5, and then since then I have decided I like a US size 1 usually for knitting socks, and I have switched over to, normally Chiagoo is my go-to brand, but I love, these were recommended to me by a local yarn store owner, Hiya Sharp Flexi Flyers. Or flyers? Hiya Sharp Flyers. I'm not sure if they're called Flexi Flyers or Flyers. But yes, they're these guys. There are 3 of them. If you're used to or familiar with DPNs, you're usually working with 4 or 5 needles. There are 3 of these, and they are bendy, whereas a DPN is not. So these are kind of like a hybrid of a circular needle and a double-pointed needle, which is why I love them. You don't have any fiddly long cord that you have to be shoving in places, and you don't have to worry about like that laddering so much with the DPNs because these are nice and flexible, and you can get the stitches nice and tight in between where you're changing needles. How these work is, hang on, let me put these ones away before I lose them, because I am notorious for losing 1 out of 3 and then having to do a full house search. I'm putting it up here. Go up there. Go in there. Sorry for that noise. Okay, so how they work is, this is my current sock project. These are the Bonfire Socks by Potter and Bloom. You have your stitches, live stitches on 2 needles, and then you're working around with the 3rd. So it's basically like a DPN, but you only have 2 needles, and they bend, so you're not have to be worried about that rigidity of having multiple double-pointed needles. So you're able to just working around and around and around, kind of like a circular, but you have 2 needles, and you're just working with this one, so knit round and round, whatever. Love these. You don't have to do any funny counts as far as working like a heel flap or moving anything over. You just work on one of the needles. Great for doing toes, heels, the whole thing. You don't have to switch any needles anywhere, and I love them. They might not be for everybody, but I do recommend giving them a try. They're a little bit higher of a price point than a DPN, at least the ones that I had experienced. I'm sure there's some really fancy DPNs out there as well, but they're about $24 maybe for a pair. But this is the one pair that I have, and I love them. I have them in 2 different sizes, and that is all. And they are my sock knitting needles, and I am perfectly content to have just those. And I have thought about destashing literally all of my other ones because these are perfection, and that's all I need. But definitely, if you can, try out different versions, borrow from a friend, go to a yarn store, ask questions, because you kind of have to find your ideal sock knitting needle scenario. All right, so let's talk socks. The first pair of socks that I ever knit was in high school. A friend's mom offered to teach me and Emily of a Rambling Yarn and our moms how to knit socks. And it's a sneak peek, it's wild. I don't know what the pattern is, Em. If you happen to know, drop that down below. But it was a basic sock pattern. I'm not sure if it was written for worsted weight yarn or if we were just doing it in worsted weight yarn. But we did them in worsted weight yarn. Or at least I did. I don't know what you did, Em. Worsted weight yarn. Mine is 100% acrylic, and they are 100% not the same size, and 100% slouchy and not my fave. I wear these occasionally just to reminisce, but these are really just sticking around for memory's sake. As you can see, they are not the same size. I don't know which one was first, and I'm not sure if it was because of the yarn that one stretched out more, or if really my gauge was that drastically different. But these were on DPNs, and that's when I was like, nope, not making socks. I knew how to knit at that point. I had been knitting for a little bit, and I actually knew how to knit before I knew how to crochet. Fun fact, guys. But yeah, I was like, I'm never knitting socks again. I hate this. Not happening. And I don't know if it was a combination of the DPNs and the worsted weight and the acrylic and all of that, but I was not a fan. And I pretty much swore I was never making socks again. So that was about 2007 or so, 2008. And yeah, the first actual pair I knit was in 2019. So yeah, I swore that off for a good long while. The first pair that I made, 2019 November-ish, were these. I'm going to show you on the sock blockers. And I don't remember the shop I got these from. They're off Etsy and they shipped from Poland, but they're beautiful, laser cut. She has a bunch of different designs. They're nice and thick and sturdy. You can get, like, mine just says size small, but you can get like a monogram on there. I got a pair that's really flowery and pretty for my mom. They come in different sizes. They're lovely. So I'm going to put one of each pair on the blockers. I'll cut it out for the rest of the video, but I will explain to you now what I'm doing. I am putting the sock on the sock blocker. Sock blockers are not a necessary thing, but they're nice if you want to take pictures or have a podcast. Otherwise, you can just wet your socks and lay them flat to dry. I will say also, most of my socks are superwash and could be thrown in the washing machine and possibly the dryer or laid flat to dry, but I hand wash all of them. I have a bin in the closet. I throw all the socks in there. I wash them all. So the first pair that I made in 2019 were the Vanilla Latte socks. This was my first pair of fingering weight socks. It may have been my first time working with fingering weight yarn, honestly. This is by a local dyer. I got it at an event that I was selling at. Knits for Comfort. I am in Connecticut, in case anyone was wondering. Knits for Comfort, and I believe the color was called Fireside Cider and Spice, or Spice and Cider, something about fires and cider and whatnot. The color dulled a little bit with washing, and I don't know if that was what I was washing it with, or the yarn itself. It was more like autumnal to begin with, but I do really love these. This is when I was making them 56 stitches on US 2s, and these are a little slouchy. They, like, if I wear them in shoes, they want to scrunch down on me. So not my ideal fit, but I think for my first pair, I did pretty all right. I got an eye of partridge, slip stitch, poorly done slip stitch heel, a slip stitch heel. This, if I didn't say already, because I've recorded this twice, Vanilla Latte socks. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. There's a bazillion project pages to get inspo on. They are by Virginia Rose Jeans. I don't know if she has an Instagram, but on Ravelry. And a vanilla sock is basically a sock where you're just doing stockinette. You do ribbing, you do stockinette, you do some kind of a heel, some more stockinette, some kind of a toe. Really simple. People like them because you don't have to really look at them. You don't have to really think about them. And once you know how to make socks, they're super mindless and go super quick. And are great for like self-striping yarns and stuff where you just want to show off the yarn and not have to think about a pattern. But these are the Vanilla Latte. It's just like a 6x2-ish rib, except you're alternating a knit and a purl row here. So it just gives a tiny bit of extra texture there. So these are a really good one if you have a basic grasp on knit stitches. If you've never... No, we'll get to that later. I'll talk about that after. So the first pair completed in 2020 are these. I kind of was off-roading on these because I was like, I've made one pair exactly to pattern. I know how to knit. I can make up socks. So these are kind of the same gist as the Vanilla Latte, but I decided to do them in twisted rib, which was hindsight not a great idea because I was doing the same stitch count and twisted rib is tighter. So these came out quite narrow indeed. And I tend to like a tight fitting rib variety sock because I like that they don't slouch down, but these are some negative ease and they do not go on well over my foot, which is a pity because I really love the yarn. The yarn that I use for these is something I have no idea what it is. I got it at a swap table at an event and I absolutely love it. Some of my favorite colors, but I don't know what it is. It's some sort of high twist 2-ply situation. And then this is that same Fire and Spice Knits for Comfort one. Again, 56 stitches on a size 2, 6x2 twisted rib. And this one I tried a Fish Lips Kiss heel, which is a very popular heel pattern. It is a short row heel with like a special secret twin stitch situation. The pattern itself is just the heel pattern. It's like $1 on Ravelry. I forget who it's by, but it's super popular, so you will be able to find it. But I don't love a short row heel. I much prefer the gusset, like I said, because it gives you a little more room through here, and I have a high arch. So this is just too narrow right here, and it pulls over the top of my foot and is really hard to get on. Even without the twisted rib, not a fan. The pattern is super detailed and has a lot of info in it as far as measuring your foot and how to figure out what size sock to make for you or anyone that you're making socks for. So it's worth it for that, but the heel itself, I don't know. Maybe I haven't done it enough to truly appreciate it, but for the way my foot is, it just does not work. And I did not do a stupendous job. It's kind of felted itself together, so you can't tell, but it was very gappy and just not glamorous. So that is the second pair, or the first pair of 2020. Pair number 2 of 2020 is this pair. This is a true vanilla sock. It is just stockinette in a self-striping yarn. The top, the heel toes and cuffs are in a yarn that I dyed with flowers from a bush in my yard. I believe it was Rose of Sharon, which are like hot pink and purple, and it came out this like pale gray. Bizarre. And then this self-striping is Lion Brand Mani Petty in the colorway Crew. This is available, or it was, at Joann. So it's a commercially available box store sock yarn. The quality of it is not my favorite in comparison to like an indie dye, but it is a great starter, and it's not expensive. They come in 50-gram skeins, so you can either do 2 50-gram skeins and get 2 matchy socks and make them a little bit longer, but I found for my size foot, I should say I wear a US women's 7-ish, sometimes 7.5, sometimes 6.5. My feet are weird. But yeah, generally US size 7 foot, and I can get a pair of socks if I make them a little bit shorter in the leg out of a 50-gram skein. So just keep that in mind if you're buying sock yarn. You should probably start it with 100 grams, see what you get out of that, but when I buy 100 grams, I usually end up with a bunch left over and can either use it for heels, toes, and cuffs or make like a shorter pair second go round. Sorry I'm sniffing so much. My husband has a fire going in our fireplace, and it got really smoky for a second, and now smoke is in the air, and I'm just sniffing. So these are, basic vanilla. I tried a Eye of Partridge heel, which I may or may not have messed up on that side. This is a little fuzzy because I've been wearing them, obviously, but I really like the Eye of Partridge heel. This is still heel flap and gusset, but it's just a different stitch texture in the heel flap. I really like it, but it requires a little more concentration than I'm usually into with socks. I think it's a 4-row repeat instead of like a 2-row repeat. And toddler life, you get interrupted, and then I can't remember where I was, and then it doesn't matter. But I do really like these. Really like the self-striping sequence, was really happy with that. I was like, ooh, I like this Lion Brand yarn. Let me get more of it. And then I got more of it. Another skein of Lion Brand Mani Petty, not positive what the colorway name was called, but I never want to buy it again, and I don't recommend that you do either, so I'm not going to point it out to you. Now, I knit this one first. So this one I got a 50-gram skein, and I was like, all right, I'm going to make a little bit shorter sock. I can use the 50 grams to make 2 socks. I think this is when I went up to 64 stitches, so they were a little bit bigger. I was flying through them on my little 9 inches. I was finally like, yeah, I know how to make socks. Look at me go. And I was like, this stripe sequence is kind of odd. If you had gotten 250 grams, you could have probably made 2 matching socks, but still the stripe sequence, as I'm about to show you, gets real weird. The brown is Knit Picks Hawthorn and some brown color that I had left over. So this is sock 1, sock 2. Yeah, what is going on here? So if it had been one continuous stripe, you take out the brown toe, and you have that. So that would have been one sock, which is a really, really strange color sequence. You have these giant swaths of non-stripe, but then stripes. And they're not, I don't know. The stripes are like all different row lengths, and it's kind of just chaos. And then there's like this giant stripe of white, which I feel like is accidental. And it wasn't even like the center like split into different, because some self-stripings have like a big band of like yellow or something, and that's where you're supposed to cut and make the second sock. No, that's not what that is. So these are just crazy. This is what I was working on over my birthday in February of last year, and I was just so proud that I was making socks, and I was going really fast, and we were at the last fiber event that ever there was. We were at the Boston Farm and Fiber Fest. I was knitting in the hotel, and I was just, I love sock knitting. I'm going to buy more sock yarn at the Fiber Fest, and I did, and it was great. But yeah, these just came out so weird. I knit them like over the weekend, so I was really proud of myself for knitting so fast. And then the first time I put them on, I don't even think I had shoes on. I may have had shoes on for like 4 minutes. Then I put them on, and in a place where there was like no wear or friction. Like sometimes you get holes after a while, like on the bottom of the toe or under the heel. On the back of my ankle, the sock just split. Just split. Wasn't even a hole. Just was like split. Split. And I tried to darn it back together and just did an awful job of it. So yeah, these socks I think got worn once for that like 4 minutes, and that was it. And they're not comfortable now because I have this giant darning lump in the back. Probably could have done better on that, but I was just so mad at the socks. I don't know if it was a tension thing or like if there was like a missing strand maybe in the yarn there and it just split. I have no idea what happened because again, I hadn't actually worn them and they were bigger than my normal size and they fit okay, and they just gave up on life. So I kept them to put them in the box of socks, but not a fan of this. So after that unfortunate mishap, thankfully the socks redeemed themselves and I didn't have to stay mad at socks forever. I made the next pair with some yarn that I got at the Boston Farm and Fiber Fest. I have no idea why I have such a hard time saying that. I have a whole vlog on that Fiber Fest if you want to remember what it was like to be around humans. That was like the busiest event I have probably ever been in because it was in a building with a weird layout, and we were like, it was beginning of February 2020 before the world did things that it did in 2020. But yeah, we were like shoulder to shoulder, like shoving past people in a kind and knitterish way. But yeah, it was just so many people. And thinking back, I was like, wow, we were all just maskless and just rubbing all over each other in this enclosed building. And we were fine. But yeah, that was the end of the Fiber Fest. But I got this yarn there and I made what is and what may forever be my favorite pair of socks. Which is funny because this wasn't something I wasn't sure was going to work out as sock yarn. This is Mad Fuzzy in the colorway Madam. I forget what her base name is called, but it's an East Frisian yarn, and it's not superwash. It's 100% wool, East Frisian wool, and it has no nylon or any other content in it. So she was selling it as sock yarn, and I was kind of like, it has no nylon, I don't know if it's going to hold up. But something about this breed of sheep must be magical. And I just absolutely love these. I love the way they feel. I love the way they fit. They have like a really unique elasticity to them. And I just love them. I haven't had the opportunity to get another skein of Mad Fuzzy. She's a small, I've talked about her before, but she's a small dyer in Maine. And all of her yarn is locally milled, which is hard to come by. So I thought that was awesome, and a lot of the colors that she dyes aren't exactly my color palette. This is absolutely my color palette, but a lot of the colors on the same base, I'm like, I don't really want that color, but I really want that base. So every time she does a shop like little update, I'm always checking for a color that I actually want because I love this yarn. So these are the Blueberry Waffle Socks, which is more of a sock recipe than a sock pattern, but it's also free on Ravelry. and it is by Sandy Turner, I believe. So it's a, like, I don't know, I wouldn't say alternating rib, but it's a broken rib, some kind of ribbing where you stop doing the ribbing and then you do the ribbing again. I don't know the terms, but absolutely love these. This is my favorite fitting sock pattern. I definitely want to make more blueberry waffles. It's an insanely popular pattern for good reason. But yeah, these are just my favorite, and I love them, and I've worn them a bunch, and they, other than like right on the very heel part, the wear on them is so minimal. And yeah, there's something to be said for a farm yarn. It lasts. So not all 100% wool yarns can really be recommended for sock knitting. Usually you want that nylon content or some like polyamide or something in there besides just wool, or you might get wear through and breakage, holes and whatnot. But yeah, these have favorite pair. So thank you, Marta, for your amazing yarn. Pair number 5, this is halfway through the sock making journey, and I believe this is where I switched over to the Hiya flyers and was just forever sold on that. All of the socks have like my hair stuck to them. Sorry. They're all clean. Still. Okay. This is the Mahogany Run sock by Kay of the Crazy Sock Lady, who I'll talk about later on. She's awesome for sock resources. This was not the best choice of yarn for this pattern. I don't know if you can see that there's like some ribbing and some eyelets. If I stretch them out. There's little holy polka dotty eyelets, and they're really cute. Probably should have gone with the less fun yarn. For this one, you would have been able to see the patterning better, but I absolutely love this yarn. This is by Kitty Pride Fibers, both of them, and they're both one of a kind skeins. I love this blue orange. Like I said, blue is, or maybe I said it in the other video. Either way, blue is not my go-to ever, but I really love this blue-orange combo so much. So these are really fun. I'm not the greatest at doing eyelets. My tension gets really weird. I don't know if you can tell, but it's just kind of puckery and funny in some spots, so maybe it's better that I chose a yarn that kind of hides it. But overall, happy with these. I feel like this is where I figured out that I should do the larger gusset size for my instep. It fits a little bit better, so I do this is a 64 stitch sock, but I do the 60 or 72 size, or sometimes even larger, heel flap and gusset, and it gives me just a little more width around my big chunk and instep, and they just fit better. This is a nice fitting pair of socks. I just don't like the way that my eyelets look, but other than that, I like them. Pair number 6 is the Rye Light Socks by Tin Can Knits, which I'm going to recommend probably as, if you're not wanting to do a straight up vanilla sock pattern, a really, really great beginner sock pattern. It is also free, and Tin Can Knits is just really good at explaining everything, and really good at being like, when they're like, knit the instep, and you're like, wait, what's an instep? They have a drawing of like every part of the sock, cuff, leg, heel flap, heel turn, instep, gusset, all of it. Really, really detailed pictures and everything. It comes in like every size for every human. And this is the light version, but they also have a Rye socks, which is either DK or worsted. I'm not positive, but a heavier weight sock if you're not looking to start out with fingering weight and you're a little intimidated by that. Tin Can Knits in general for knit patterns is an awesome starting place. But if you're new to sock knitting and you know how to knit in purl, Rye socks. So these are the Rye Lights. This is I Could Live in Hope by Megs & Co yarn, which is stunning. And this leftover orange from the Kitty Pride socks. Yeah, it's, I don't know if you can tell, it's got a little garter panel down the front. Again, kind of a crazy yarn choice for showing off detail, but a garter panel and then just stockinette for the rest. I love how the micro striping in this yarn worked up. I love how the gusset has like, just the way the stripes are in the gusset part. I love them. These are so good. This is when I started counting rows as well, and using light bulb stitch markers, which I'll try to remember to link as well, because I swear by them now for all projects, knit and crochet. But counting like every 10 or every 5 rows, putting a light bulb stitch marker so I can make sure both of my socks came out the same size. If they don't, my feet again are slightly different sizes, so that's okay. But It does make for a much more uniform sock and take some of the like having to stop and count out when you're putting stitch markers every couple rows. So this is, I think, where I kind of started feeling like I really maybe knew what I was doing, which I really don't, but it was a good start. Tin Can Knits, guys. Go get you some of that. Number 7, these are probably my most worn winter weight. I mean, they're all winter weight. They're wool socks, but these are really nice in boots, but not like super chunky. These are, again, a vanilla sock. I tend to gravitate towards a 1x1 twisted rib on the top, if you haven't noticed. I really like twisted ribbing. Pardon me. Tea break. Hold on. That's fire smoke, guys. It's brutal. I just drank that tea upside down like a weirdo. What was I saying? Yeah, twisted rib on the top, slip stitch heel, vanilla sock. So this one was really fun. I took the self-striping from the rainbow pair. Where'd you go? This pair, the Lion Brand Mani Pedi Crew. So you can see it's the same color sequence, but I did 2 rows of crew and then 1 row of the gray Patons Croy. I think the colorway is linen. And these are both yarns that you can usually find at like Joann or Hobby Lobby or something like that. So heels, toes, and cuffs are in Patons Croy, and then you can see it's 2 rows of the, I don't know if you can see. Yeah, 2 rows of crew and then 1 row of linen from Patons Croy. I think, did I carry the yarns or did I sew in the ends? I wasn't cutting because it's all one continuous. I think I may have carried the gray yarn. I don't think I cut it. I think I carried them both. I can't tell. What did I do? Where's the inside of the sock? Did I sew them in? No, I carried them. There's a little bit of a seam, but it was just over like 1 row, so it wasn't a big deal. I love the way these fit. Patons Croy tends to be closer to a sport weight yarn, so they're a little chunkier. And I've learned that if I do them on a 1.5 versus a US 1, and go down in stitch count and up in needle size, it fits pretty well. So I really like those. I wear these ones a ton, and I just love the way that the mixing the self-striping with the solid came out. I think that's a really good way to stretch if you have a skein of self-striping yarn and you end up with a little bit left over because you didn't make like knee socks. That's a really good way to stretch it into another pair of socks and have them not be identical, but still get your use out of that self-striping yarn, especially if it's indie dyed, because those tend to be more expensive because they're really tedious to dye. So pro tip, mix in a solid and make your own self-striping. And then things got wild. These are pair number, what are we on? 8. These are a vanilla sock as well, and these are scrappy. So these are just left over from all the other things, basically. So I got some leftover crew in there. We got some leftover Kitty Pride fibers, more crew, the Fireside Kitty Pride, that Lion Brand that I hated, something else. It's all sorts of fingering weight scraps, some from other socks, some from other projects. Heels, toes, and cuffs are another one that I dyed myself with Wilton food dye that had exploded, and I've previously done cake decorating, so I have a whole cabinet of supplies, and I have them all in like a little container, and some of them had leaked. So I had a bunch of purples and blues, and yeah, I dyed a skein with them. It has not proven to be super uniform. This one's like way more blue, and that one's way more purple, but it was a fun experiment rather than just dumping a bunch of dye down the drain. I will try to link a channel as well that dyes with food coloring if you want to try playing around with natural, or not natural dyeing, hand dyeing with stuff you might already have on hand. So these were for Sock Week 2020, which is a knit-along challenge that is hosted by Natalie. And it's basically to knit a pair of socks, whatever pair of socks you want. I think it has to be adult size, but one sock, not even a pair, one sock in a week. And she does it in correlation with Shark Week just because it's fun. So that's usually August. But I was able to knit, I got through the first sock, I think by like Wednesday. And then I think I got down to like just before the toe on the second sock by the end of the week. You give me a competition, y'all, I will compete. My wrists were not happy about it, but competitive soul here. So yeah, if you're looking to knit fast, do a vanilla sock with some sort of striping. Either self-striping yarn where you're like, I have to get to the next stripe first. Or next for competition with your stripes. Or just using scraps because you're like, ooh, I want to see how the next color looks. These are completely different. I didn't even try to make them match other than the heels, toes, and cuffs. But I think they're super fun and they just knit up so quick because I was having so much fun with the stripe sequences and I used up a ton of scraps. I have a whole bin of, my pointing is always weird, whole bin of just fingering weight scraps waiting to become scrappy things. And I don't need any more blankets, but I love making scrappy socks. So I love those. It was kind of a pain to sew in all the ends. You can see that I have a little bit of a seam going on. Obviously there's a little bit of a jog because you're changing colors, but I've since learned some techniques for like weaving in your ends as you go, which works pretty well as well, which I wasn't aware of at this time. But I'm going to have to link so many things, guys. I'm going to try and remember them all to get you all the resources. But Sock Week is something Natalie does every year, usually. So you can look out for Sock Week 2021, probably around August. These ones I knit last fall. They took me a little bit longer just because I was doing them at the same time I was releasing my first pullover pattern. So they took me a minute. I kept putting them down and picking them back up. But these are the Simple Skip Socks by Adrienne Koo, and the yarn is Lane and Lotus in her high twist base and the colorway Salted Caramel. So it has a really pretty, almost cabled looking, it's called a skip stitch, which is why they're the Simple Skip Socks. It's an abbreviation for something about slipping, knitting one, and then passing over. It's like an acronym. So really pretty, memorizable pattern. You do have to kind of pay more attention than if it was just vanilla because you're doing some ribbing, and then I think it's a 2-row repeat for the skip stitch. But yeah, they're really lovely. They fit really well. And I love this color from Jen. Absolutely love. So yeah, they took me a little bit to make, but not because they were a hard sock. They're just, it took a little more thinking, and I had a lot of thinking going on at that point. But I'm really happy. I thought these were going to be my last pair of 2020, but then I squeaked in one more, y'all. The very last pair of the year are these. They're a little bit of a shorter sock, and it's a made up, I think I made it up pattern. And I'm counting these as finished because they are a sock, but I do have so many ends that I need to weave in because I did not weave them in as I went. Did not weave them in as I went. So yeah, right now it looks really poofy right here. It's because there's so many ends in there. But these, I'm sure, I talked about this in my last podcast episode. I'm pretty sure that there's probably a pattern out there like this, but it is a kind of, I started out thinking I was going to make another pair of vanilla waffles and then started winging it. An alternating rib situation. So like one, yeah, I'm not going to bother explaining it, but I was striping 4 different yarns the whole time, or 3 yarns. This is Lane and Lotus in the color Harvest Moon. This is the same Salted Caramel as the Simple Skip Socks throughout. And then I alternated it with leftovers from that Mad Fuzzy Purple and then that Mystery Swap Table Skein. So you can see the striping better there, but it just blends in and kind of almost looks like one yarn. So I really liked that combo and just the way those colors played together. And yeah, I was able to sneak out in like the last week and a half or so of December one more pair of socks. So I got to 10, which I think is really awesome for someone that makes as much stuff as I do and has as much stuff going on. I feel like 10 pairs of socks is pretty great. And again, I make everything into a competition, but really, it really doesn't matter how many pairs of socks you make. If you make 1 pair of socks, make 1 sock, whatever. Make what makes you happy, y'all. But my pile of socks, which are now all over the place, do make me happy. I'm going to put this down and I'm going to share with you just a little bit more as far as resources that might be helpful if you want to make socks in 2021. So first off, if you are like, how do I start? I don't know anything about making socks. I don't know how to knit. I'm going to say, learn how to knit. You need basics of like knitting and purling, and I think in learning to knit something flat, like a scarf or a dishcloth or something, is the best place to start with knitting. And before you knit socks, it might be helpful to knit a hat because you're working on a circular round and round situation, but it's not as tiny as a sock. And you don't have to make a fingering weight sock, but either way, like it's a small circumference. You're working around a foot. So probably make a hat or start out with like worsted weight socks. But if you know how to knit and purl, that's basically it. And a lot of techniques in a hat, as far as decreases, would also come up in a sock. So that's another good place to start off. I don't have any particular patterns other than those Rye Light socks that I'm going to recommend. But if you look for vanilla socks on Ravelry, there's going to be a lot of plain, beginner friendly. A lot of them are free, very simple, just stockinette socks, no cables, patterns, nothing fancy. And of course you don't have to use a fancy indie dyed yarn. You can go get something that's at Joann. That was a really loud motorcycle. But as far as people who could help you knit socks, there's a ton of resources on YouTube, but 3 that I'm going to recommend to you. Check out these channels. Denise of Earth Tones Girl, and again, all of this is going to be linked down below. Earth Tones Girl, Denise has an awesome podcast and an amazing channel in general, but I think last year, 2020 or 2019 maybe, she put out a complete, basically a whole class that would be worth paying for on how to knit socks for free on YouTube. And she broke it down, I think it was weekly, bi-weekly, working through a shorty sock pattern, so like a short sock, how to do literally all of it is up on YouTube. Everything you need to know about supplies. She shows it on multiple types of needles, so like double point, circular. I don't know if she does those flyer things that I use, but that might not be the best starting point if you've not knit socks before. So check out Denise's class. It is amazing that she has it out there for free. She also has a sock pattern that goes with it, but you could sub in some other sock pattern if you wanted to. It's just a really good place to get started if you have questions about sizing and materials and just everything. She's so thorough, and she has just a very common, unlike me, her videos are not chaotic, and she's a really good teacher, and she does teach knitting for like Vogue and stuff, so she knows her stuff, and an amazing free resource. In addition to that, you can check out The Crazy Sock Lady on YouTube, Kay. The mahogany run socks I mentioned are her patterns. She has tons of sock patterns. She has a podcast and a bunch of other amazing knit content, but she also has some sock knitting tutorials. I think she also has some free sock patterns. So she's a great place to follow along, and she does a lot of like knit alongs for socks and stuff too if you want to participate. She did a summer sock camp, which was kind of like Natalie's Sock Week, but like over the summer, and pretended it was a summer camp for sock knitting, just like hashtag, not like an actual camp, but really fun. Prizes and everything. So definitely check out The Crazy Sock Lady if you're looking for some socky resources. And then Natalie of Knitty Natty, like I mentioned, who does Sock Week. She has some great tutorials and a lot of knowledge on sock knitting as well, and different needles and methods. So I would recommend those 3, but you can definitely type into YouTube how to knit socks, basic sock knitting, sock knitting 101, these types of things, and get started. If you're going from crochet straight into socks, you might be a little confused. Again, start with a more basic knit project. I would recommend. That's just how my mind works. But if you're feeling like an overachiever and you want to go watch some Denise videos and make yourself some socks, you can do it. And I don't know that I'm the person to ask if you have questions, but if you're looking for me to point you in the direction of someone who can answer your questions, I can try to help. But again, go check out those channels because they are knitters with a capital K, sock knitters with capital Ks, and probably know a lot more than I do. So I hope that you found some of this helpful and that this just wasn't a bunch of me talking about things I put on my feet. Hopefully there was some information that does help you. If you have specific questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Drop them down in the comments. I'd love to know how many socks you made in 2020, how many socks you're planning on making in 2021, favorite sock yarns, favorite sock needles, favorite sock anything. Tell me about your socks. There's a sentence that people say all the time. Tell me about your socks, guys. Thank you for watching. Again, not my normal video, usually a lot more crochet in there. Bi-weekly podcast tutorials, patterns, all sorts of stuff. if you liked me and my ways, feel free to like this video and subscribe to this channel, and I'll get back to you with more crochet content with a bit of knitting very soon. Thank you for watching, guys, and happy sock making 2021.